Hello and welcome back to my nutrition channel where I talk to you about food and help you become a little bit more confident about choosing what to eat and in this crazy world of nutrition. So today we're talking about a topic which is all the rage, so I thought we could settle it once and for all, and that is, what are carbs? Are they any good for us? Should we be eating them? And also what ketogenic diet is and whether we should be following that diet or not. And to break it down, I'll be doing what a carb is, what a carbohydrate is, and why it's been given such a bad rep, and then what a ketogenic diet is, and then the claims and the crap, and basically what we should then do with that piece of information. So we'll start with what a carb is, and it is just a carbohydrate. So oxygen, hydrogen, carbon mushed together. That is a macronutrient, and a carbohydrate is essentially a sugar molecule or a chain of sugar molecules, and that sugar can be different types. So there's like glucose, fructose, lactose, galactose, but it's really the type and the structure and the formation of that chain that gives the carbohydrate its properties. So we break carbohydrates down into two categories. We have simple and we have complex. So your simple carbohydrate is a single or a very short chain of sugars, like a single sugar or a short chain of sugars. And it means that when we ingest it, our body finds it quite easy to break that chain down, and so we can then absorb it in single sugar forms. And the way we break it down is by using enzymes. Enzymes are just a molecule that help us carry out reactions in our body. It's not really specific to carbohydrates. We do it for proteins, fats, and lots of other things as well. And we don't want lots of sugar in our bloodstream, because when we do have high sugar in our bloodstream, it damages and messes up some of the balances we have. So once we've ingested that simple sugar and the enzymes have broken it down, it's been absorbed to our bloodstream. If it's too high and above our normal level, our preferred level of glucose or sugar levels, we produce a hormone called insulin. And insulin just essentially does lots of things, but it just brings that sugar level down to the normal and preferred range. And just like we don't want those sugar spikes, we don't really want insulin spikes as well, because over time our body can get used to insulin and not respond as well to it. So it manifests in complications like insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. But that's not to say we don't want any sugar, because that our brain, the primary energy fuel source is sugar, and we need it just like to function. So that's simple sugars. And then the other branch is complex carbohydrates, or starch. Another word for it is starch. And this just means that chain that I was talking about is just a bit longer, and there are a few different structures as well. So because the chain is longer, and the enzymes we use to break it down, it takes them a little bit longer to break it up, and then the sugar that gets released into our bloodstream takes a little bit longer, and we don't get that harsh glucose spike. And we also don't get that harsh insulin spike, which is pretty good. And it means our energy levels can stay consistent for longer. So where can you find these different types of carbohydrates? Simple sugars, they're like raw sugar, honey, and in fruits and things. And then complex carbohydrates, you can find it in the form of starch in wholemeal breads and whole grain breads and actual whole grains, so like quinoa, bulgur wheat, buckwheat, millet, rye, all those oats. And simple sugars, it can be like in breads as well, so like white breads, white rice, white pasta. And if you remember me saying that the structure and the formation of that chain is really important. So there's another form of complex carbohydrate called cellulose, aka dietary fiber. And cellulose is what makes up the walls of plant cells. And we can't digest that. We don't have the right enzyme to get in there and snip up all of the sugar molecules. So it just goes straight through us pretty much. And that dietary fiber is what makes up our stools, and it feeds our gut microbiome, and it also and there's also lots of supporting evidence for reducing risk in cardiovascular disease, as well as type 2 diabetes and some cancers too. So complex carbohydrates are great. Starch, once we break it down into glucose, can be used for energy, and the dietary fiber or cellulose is good for our gut health and prevention of lots of diseases. And simple carbohydrates also have their place. So if you need a quick energy glucose hit, like for example if you are running a long race, then having some of that simple carbohydrates would be really good. When I say you need a quick fix of sugar, I don't really mean like your 330 slump. Still opt for that whole grain, whole meal version, because you will not get that harsh glucose and insulin spike, and you'll have longer energy and you won't have a crash afterwards as well. So still go for those. So that's all about carbs. You're an expert now, and now we can talk about the ketogenic diet. And there are lots of variations, but generally and simply, the ketogenic or the keto diet is a very, very low carbohydrate, low to moderate protein, and very high fat diet. And if you remember from my last video, those 3 protein, fat, and carbohydrates are macronutrients. But also in the diet, you are gonna restrict the calories a little bit, so that's your overall energy intake. And when I say low carbohydrate, I mean like really low. So that's like, it's less than 50 grams of carbohydrate a day. That's equivalent in like food terms to about a cup of pasta in a day. So very low carbs, and so most of your calories are going to come from fats. So to do that, to keep that low carbohydrate situation, you'll be steering clear of bread, pasta, rice, fruit, lots of veggies, and then to keep the high fat situation, you're going to be having lots of oil, avocados, nut seeds, butter, ghee, dairy, lots of full fat dairy, but no sugar, because sugar is a carbohydrate. So you can't just eat ice cream and call it a ketogenic diet, you know? And the reason you want to keep your fats high, carbs low, is because you're wanting to put your body into a state of ketosis. And ketosis essentially is when either the body is in starvation mode or just that the body has got very low carbohydrate stores. So what it does is it switches from using carbohydrates as its primary energy source to fats. And like just a little thing on this, if you're not in ketosis, like for example myself, you're still burning fat all the time, right? And we use carbohydrates when we exercise more, but we are always burning fats at a low level. So when I say it switches, it's not like we weren't using fats beforehand, before ketosis. It's just now it's the primary source rather than, a little bit, and carbohydrates. So like we mentioned, carbohydrates get broken down and give us energy in the form of glucose. You do not get this in ketosis because you're primarily running on fat. And the ketosis happens 3 or 4 days after you've been eating less than 50 grams of carbohydrate a day. And what happens is, because when you're relying on this fat intake, that fat gets processed by the liver, and what is produced is ketones. And you remember I said that the brain uses lots of glucose and it's its primary source of energy? Well, it also likes ketones. And when you're in ketosis, there will be about 75% of the brain's energy will be coming from ketones. But there are still parts of your brain that just needs glucose and it can't run off ketones, right? So that extra 25% is made up a little bit of that less than 50 grams of carbohydrates you're having, but it's also made by your body. So your body can produce glucose itself. Your liver, what it does a process called gluconeogenesis. And it basically takes amino acids, which are protein building blocks, and it can turn them into glucose. And it also takes a little part of a fatty acid and turns that into glucose too. So that's how it works, how you can like stay alive. But why are people doing this? Like, why are people cutting out bread? So weight loss, really. And well, once I describe this, you'll see that there is a difference between weight loss and fat loss. Fat loss is the one that people really want, but a lot of this is just weight loss. So there are a few ways this weight loss happens. 1, you're burning more fat loss, right? 2, like I said in the beginning, keto diets generally have got a slight restriction on calories, and this will put you in a calorie deficit. A calorie deficit is just when you are eating and consuming fewer calories, so fewer energy than you are expending. And an important point is that you can do this no matter what like macronutrient ratio that you're doing. So you could be in a high carbohydrate diet and still be in a calorie deficit and still see weight loss. So it's not actually necessarily the keto part of it that is resulting on this section, this reason of why the weight loss is happening. And the third way that weight loss happens on a keto diet is that, so in your body, you have stores of carbohydrates, and one of these stores is a molecule called glycogen. Glycogen is just a carbohydrate, a chain of sugars, right? And when it's stored, it also has associated water molecules attached to it, like stuck to it. And it has about 4 water molecules per molecule of glycogen. So when you lose the glycogen stores, you're also losing all of that associated water. So you're peeing it out, and it's just water loss. It's not fat loss, it's just weight loss. And a fourth way that you'll see weight loss is because you're reducing your glucose levels in your blood, and therefore also reducing your insulin levels. And insulin has lots of functions, like I said earlier, and one of them is fat storage. So if you reduce your glucose, you reduce insulin, you're also reducing some of the fat storage that's going on as well. And the last 2 reasons I just said, so the water one and insulin one, can be a little bit problematic if you're only doing the diet short term and your goal is fat loss, because once you start carbing up again, all of that, the carbohydrate stores of glycogen is being restored, and you restore those associated water. And if you increase your carbohydrate, you increase your insulin, and yeah, so that all comes back too. So that's not going to give you the sustained goal that you want. And so some people do operate quite well long term on keto diet. So an example of a reported benefit is reduced sugar cravings. That I'd just like to say that you can get reduced sugar cravings without being on a keto diet. So if you reduce your sugar intake, manage your stress levels, get better sleep, stay hydrated, eat regularly, focus on your hormones, and you eat a balanced diet, then you can reduce your sugar cravings. But also on that same note, like, honor your cravings, right? Because if you don't, then you may get even more hungry and give in, and then you eat more than what is necessary. And then also, if you just ignore it completely, then you are not fueling your body when your body is telling you that it needs fueling. And to be honest, I think it's similar reasons for lots of the reported benefits. So yeah, when I did the research, I saw people reporting better blood triglycerides and better cholesterol and better energy, reduced blood glucose and things like that. You can achieve those things without being on a keto diet. But so now we can move on to some of the complications of their diet. And the main one, I guess, is, so all those lovely benefits of carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates, gone. So reducing lots of healthy foods like that means that you might not get enough of the nutrients that you need, and there's a lack of diversity, and you don't get the reduced risk of disease. So you don't get the prevention of disease, And not to mention the lack of fiber. So not having cellulose in your diet and your gut not moving as well as it should be, and your dehydration will mean that you might be a bit constipated and things can get a little bit bunged up. Quite common if you're following the ketogenic diet. People also report quite strong sugar cravings right at the beginning, and that's pretty expected because you've just taken away sugar and then you haven't gone into ketosis yet, so your brain is like pissed, it needs energy, right? So that's one reported side effect. And another is something called the Keto Flow. It's not really like a flow, and it's not very researched, so it's not really in the academic literature much, but it's quite well reported on just generally. And that's nausea, brain fog, fatigue, things like that. We don't really know why it happens. It could be because of an immune response, or it could be because the sugar withdrawals, the carb withdrawals. It could be something to do with the gut microbiome, or it could be like dehydration. And dehydration is quite big as well. So when we lose all that water associated with the glycogen, we are peeing more, and so we're reducing our sodium concentration, and that can lead to dehydration, constipation, and bad breath. Bad breath is also quite common. And long term, we don't we're not 100% certain about the complications. It's because it's a really hard diet to stick to and adhere to for a long period of time. So, and there are some concerns about just not having an adequate diet and not having all the nutrients you need, as well as kidney problems, gut problems, bone fractures, which I thought was interesting, and also a reduced increased risk of cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes and some cancers. But we don't know for sure. There is a population that do adhere to the ketogenic diet quite strictly, and that is those with epilepsy and some other metabolic diseases. So ketogenic diet is actually a very successful form of dietary therapy, particularly amongst children with epilepsy. And epilepsy is overexcitement of brain cells that causes seizures. And the ketogenic diet has been shown to reduce those seizures really well, so that's great. And other conditions include Alzheimer's, obesity, and some metabolic syndromes too. But for the general population, we just don't really know that far ahead. And my opinion on this is that it is a great dietary therapy and it has improved the lives of so many people. But if you are a generally healthy person and your goals are weight management, improve gut health, energy, just reduce your cravings, sugar cravings, and you want regular bowel movements and you want a flexible, enjoyable and good relationship with food, you do not have to go on the ketogenic diet. You can implement other healthy lifestyle factors and dietary changes without cutting out major food groups, without restricting, without following a really difficult diet, and without following a short-term diet. And I think that's so adorable. Yeah, that is carbohydrates, simple and complex, the benefits of them and also what they do to the body, and then also what the ketogenic diet is and what that does and how people feel on it and some of the complications with that too. And so I asked you guys on my Instagram just about things that you wanted to know, and I pretty much covered them all. But there were a couple that were quite interesting, so I'm gonna just ask them now. And so one person asked, how accurate should I be counting my carbs? And that unfortunately is a very specific question and it has a very specific answer. So if you are just trying to be healthy, then you can do it pretty intuitively, and just knowing that a fist is a carbohydrate serving, and to go for those whole grain, whole meal options, and yeah, just keep in tune with your hunger cues, then that's good enough. You don't have to track at all. If you have a very specific fitness goal, if you're a bodybuilder or something like that, and you have a time frame, then you can use tracking apps, and you can do it quantitatively, you can do it intuitively too, but there's a bit of ambiguity with that. So yeah, it just depends on your goals really. So second question was, does the ketogenic diet help with neurogenesis? And this is interesting. So neurogenesis is the formation of new brain cells, and so that's good, right? Keeping a healthy brain. I did a little bit of research on this, and most of the studies are done on rats and mice. So can we really infer that to humans? Unsure. But they didn't seem to see much neurogenesis as a result from the keto diet, but they did see reduced apoptosis, which is cell death, and also improved memory. So I don't know really. But yeah, that is my hot take on carbohydrates and the ketogenic diet. I will be doing a video that's coming out next Sunday, and that will be all on protein. So if you have any questions about protein or any questions about this video, then pop them below, or I will also put a question box on my Instagram, so you can tell me then. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Yeah, have a beautiful week, stay healthy, choose good foods, and yeah. Bad breath.